Hello guys, welcome to my new video, and today we'll be looking at healer performance in Mythic Plus situations. And I've been doing a lot of testing. If you watch my Twitch streams, if you watch my YouTube videos, you'll see that there is a dedicated video for each of the healing spec where I do real-time commentary of the same dungeon in order to see how each healing spec is going to handle similar situations. Disclaimer before I do any of these videos, it feels that a lot of the community perception is that if this healer is not S tier, then it might not exist in the game. It's absolutely terrible, it's garbage. Every healer is going to be viable, and you'll be able to get your at least plus 15 keys with any single healing spec. Keep in mind, a lot of these rankings are to do with people who are looking to put their name on those rated.io leaderboards. Also, these videos take me a long time to edit, so if you do enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. So let's get started. And before we're gonna look at every healer, we have to look at the biggest thing that's going to change how healers are going to be ranked, or how powerful each healer is, and that's Prideful. This is your season 1 affix, and honestly this is something that's going to spawn every time you get 20% of the trash mobs, and this is going to be extremely hard in terms of your AoE healing. This mob, again, if you overcalculate, you might have to deal with Prideful with additional mobs. This is going to be a healing affix, and this is what is going to define the whole list. All the sudden Covenant choices that have explosive burst, like a huge burst, it might be 3-minute cooldown or something. A lot of the healers might pick that because it's going to line up better with Prideful and Mythic Plus. While if they're approaching raid situations, they might go for something that's shorter. And this is a prime example for something like Discipline Priest, where Ventir 45-second cooldown is better in raids, and you really want to get that Kyrian Boon of the Sended for those juicy 3-minute burst healing windows that are so strong for Prideful. In a similar way that Resto Druid might even experiment with running Flourish in Mythic Plus because they want to have a cooldown for that Prideful. You can see where I'm going. You want to make sure that Prideful, especially because it scales with higher key levels, you can get past that healing check. Maybe don't burn too many cooldowns, because the next thing you're going to be fighting is going to be a boss that requires another cooldown. So that's the name of the game. Get past Prideful, and then we'll look at healer utility and the DPS that they provide. And let's start the video with the healer that I feel is going to be one of the best healers, especially in puck situations where you're gonna provide a ton of utility, and that's going to be Restoration Druid. Resto Druid still has an insane amount of utility. You have things like Typhoon if you go into Balance Affinity, which Balance Affinity again feels like a really good option, because there's a lot of affixes in Mythic Plus dungeons that are relatively unfriendly towards melee, like Spiteful and Storming. Try and do Storming and tell me you don't hate it. But either way, Resto Druid, the only healer that has Battle Res. You have a lot of utility like Soothe, you have, Stampeding Roar that came out, you have things like added to your toolkit in terms of Nature Swiftness that's going to give you a burst healing window as well. All of a sudden, Resto Druid is still that super strong Mythic Plus healer. Blizzard has tried to balance Resto Druids in terms of nerfing their DPS, in terms of nerfing the legendaries. Even though the double life legendary has been nerfed about 20 times, it's still viable. And all of a sudden you look at Resto Druids and you have to say to yourself, hey, this healer has a spell for nearly every single situation. And if you need to deal with really high level Prideful, Resto Druid has an option of going into Mastery. Mastery is an insanely strong stat for pure healing, and it scales really well. Considering that in beta you don't really have a choice in terms of what stats you're gonna get, because you have to kind of go with the PvP gear that has a lot of versatility, you haven't really seen the true potential of Resto Druid using the Mastery build. On top of the fact that their DPS burst with the Convoke the Spirit, which is the Nightfall ability that can be used to DPS and heal. And a lot of people have seen videos where you use Convoke the Spirit with something like Balance Affinity and combine it with Heart of the Wild, and maybe use some unused trinkets, and all of a sudden you're top DPS for those 10-20 seconds and you're providing a ton of burst potential. Resto Druid at the end of the day still has a ton of utility. It is so versatile in terms of how they can output their DPS, their healing. They have lost some power because Blizzard is nerfing certain things and other healers seem to be catching up, but Resto Druid is still going to be an insane pick, whether you're going to be doing really high Prideful keys and maybe you're going to be building your talents and your stats based on that, or if you're going to be pugging keys and your utility can carry a group. Now let's go down to the healer that has received a lot of hype, and that is Resto Shaman. The hype is real at this given point because their pure HPS is really strong, both in Raid and Mythic Plus. On top of the fact that you combine that with some of the best utility in the game, you could make an argument that Resto Shaman at this point is looking to be like the best overall healer. And I say this lightly because there's a chance they might get nerfed. But if you look at their utility in Mythic Plus and how they deal with Prideful, it is relatively insane. They didn't really get a whole lot of changes. Again, Earth Shield is a big part of what makes Resto Shaman strong in terms of single target healing. Single target healing feels very good. AoE healing feels very, very good in terms of whether you are going to combine it with legendaries like Chains of Devastation. Now, Chains of Devastation might feel a bit memey because it gives you Chain Lightning and Chain Heal, and a lot of times you might not want to use that, but it does give you a 20-second buff where you can do other things in between. But if you feel like you need an additional help, you can pair it up with like the Mana Tide legendary that makes Mana Tide an additional cooldown. You don't even need these kind of cooldowns as Resto Shaman because you most likely will be running Ascendants. You have things like Spirit Link Totem, and you pretty much can handle really, really high level Pridefuls. You have Conduits that also allow you to do AoE healing if you need to. So all of a sudden you have big options between, hey, do I need AoE healing or do I need more damage or maybe a bit more single target healing? So all of a sudden you can do low level Mythic Plus keys with something like Chains of Devastation to add damage. You can do high Prideful keys with other HPS throughput legendaries. There is no clear choice in terms of covenants for Resto Shaman like it is for Resto Druid, where you can go Night Fae for raids and Mythic Plus and you'll be fine. For Resto Shaman you kind of have to make a choice if you want to go more HPS raid build with Primordial Wave from Necrolords, which I feel is really, really interesting, or if you want to add more damage in Mythic Plus situations with things like Ventir or Kyrian. But I think the overall strength of Resto Shaman lies at their pure HPS throughput combined with cooldowns. And if you're using certain legendaries, like again, I have to mention Chains of Devastation and Mythic Plus, this allows you to cast while moving because it gives you instant cast Chain Lightning and instant cast Chain Heal. You can cast or do certain amount of healing even if you have to move, if you don't have Spirit Walker's Grace. On top of, again, utility like Interrupt. You're the only healer that has an Interrupt. I think Resto Shaman is looking really, really strong. And I do fear that Resto Shaman might receive nerfs to counter the fact that they're looking really strong in all content right now in Shadowlands. And now we're going to complete this healing trio with the Discipline Priest, and all of these healers that I mentioned are looking to be very, very competitive in high Mythic Plus content that have also been used in some of the Mythic Plus competitions in Shadowlands already. And Discipline Priest, guys, is probably one of those healers that is going to be constantly getting nerfs because Blizzard is trying to get a sweet spot between the raid performance and Mythic Plus performance. Their DPS has been recently nerfed. But if you look at what Discipline Priest provides in terms of the HPS, again, the HPS is very, very competitive. In terms of their Covenant choices, you'll notice that a lot of high-end Mythic Plus pushers in terms of Discipline Priest are going to go with Kyrian. Because Kyrian, Boon of Descendant, is a 3-minute cooldown that gives you a huge power spike when dealing with Prideful. And I mentioned, that is the biggest problem right now in high Mythic Plus keys. You're a healer that might not be the best in terms of DPS, but you provide damage in the most convenient way. So your overall DPS at the end of the dungeon is going to be pretty good. In terms of what's changed for Discipline Priest, you'll notice you'll have Mind Blast on your action bars. Again, this is something that you might use, and also the fact that you can deal with affixes, and that's very, very important. One of your biggest weaknesses in BFA is how you deal with bursting when you have no targets to hit. Now you can use your Master's Spell, and the same goes for Holy Priest, in order to remove bursting stacks. The way that Grievous works in Shadowlands is made in a way that your direct heals are going to remove stacks of Grievous. And on top of the fact that you also have a lot of these utility tools like Mind Suit to deal with certain situations that could be very strong, and you're looking at affix improvements, you have to say Discipline Priest is looking to be very good. My only fear is that Discipline might get over nerfed by Blizzard because they don't want Discipline to be strong in every single content, so that's something to fear. But right now I think Discipline is an extremely fun healer, and if you're trying to transition from something like a DPS to a healer, honestly, Discipline is a bunch of fun. So this kind of completes the top 3 healers that are going to be battling, in my opinion, for the #1 spot in really high Mythic Plus keys. And the next part is going to include 2 healers that have similar advantages and disadvantages, and we're going to go into Mistweaver Monk. Mistweaver Monk is a healer that's going to be a melee healer in Mythic Plus situations. A lot of times you'll be running things like Rising Mist in order to provide healing and DPS. In terms of Covenant choices, honestly, it's the same kind of deal like a Discipline Priest. If you feel like you can or will do raid situations, maybe Necrolord, Bone Deuce Brew, it might be better suited in raid situations in terms of the shorter cooldown. If you want to do really high Prideful keys using the Kyrian Weapons of Order, which is going to give you a big boost for around 30 seconds or so. Again, you can see a pattern here. Do I need an ability that has shorter cooldown for raids in order to fit the damage patterns? Or do I want to use an ability that's going to have a huge cooldown on it, but it's going to give me a huge potential or spike potential in order to deal with Prideful? Mistweaver, in my opinion, is still an extremely good starting healer for anyone who's looking to progress in Mythic Plus, because the biggest problem with Mythic Plus healing for a lot of the classes is single target healing and keeping tanks alive. Mistweaver has a whole option of suiting Mist into Enveloping Mist into Vivify, and combined with legendaries like Tear or Mourning, you're gonna have a lot of HPS. Mistweaver's HPS is actually really high, so why is it not ranked higher? Mistweaver is a melee healer. In order to deal damage, you need to go into melee. A lot of the melee affixes in Mythic Plus are kinda unfriendly, and if you end up having a melee heavy comp, it can cause issues on certain affixes. On top of the fact that their overall DPS might not be the greatest, but when you look at the end of the dungeon overall DPS, you have to consider that a monk provides that 5% physical debuff that all monks do. So that's something to consider when you're building a roster around it. So the summary of Mistweaver is that the overall healing is extremely strong, but the fact that they have to go into melee in order to provide DPS, or if they're using Chi, Red Crane, they also have to go into melee in order to heal, it can bring them down a little bit, and their somewhat lower DPS output can also be a negative thing. And it's going to hit them the most in these MDI type level content, because you'll see that Spinning Crane Kick, it has been AoE capped. Red Crane has changed a lot, and all of a sudden we probably won't see Mistweavers in these MDI type dungeons either. The second healer that's gonna fill in this section is going to be Holy Paladin. Surprise, surprise, 2 melee healers grouped very closely together. That might not be a coincidence. Keep in mind that Holy Paladin has probably received the most changes in Shadowlands. All of a sudden you have things like Holy Power Pack. It can feel very different, but also the same. You still are a melee healer. You are going to be targeted by melee abilities. You have to be using your full toolkit, your Consecration, your Crusader Strike. There are a lot of differences, but the playstyle itself doesn't feel all out of place. I still have a lot of fun with my Holy Paladin, and the damage that it can provide is actually kinda crazy. The fact that Holy Paladin and Resto Druid can rely on one Covenant for both raiding and Mythic Plus is a big plus. As a Holy Paladin, you can go with Kyrian. Divine Toll is just far too strong. Shoots out 5 Holy Shock. Those 5 Holy Shocks are going to give you Glimmer if you go into Glimmer. You can use those Holy Shocks to offensively hit enemies to deal extra damage. You can also get 5 Holy Power from it, and there's also Potency Conduits that give you additional healing on the initial target hit. There's a lot of synergy with this Covenant. The fact that there is so much synergy makes me scared in case it's going to get nerfed. Holy Paladin, at the end of the day, it feels very fun. It might not be as fun as BFA, and a lot of people are panicking because in BFA, Holy Paladin was probably the best overall healer. And I feel like in Shadowlands, it's going to be a bit more of a mid-tier healer. And like I mentioned, if it's not S tier, you might as well just bin it. Or at least that's how people feel about this. I still really enjoy Holy Paladin. I think they need to have a bit of a buff in terms of pure HPS department. I think there is certain weaknesses in terms of their AoE healing, but I also feel that Holy Paladin might be the best healer for low-end keys, because their DPS is probably unmatched at this point, especially considering that your Resto Druid and Discipline Priest received pure damage nerfs in the last couple of days. So if you're doing lower keys, your Holy Paladin, look at the damage that they can deal if you use your Divine Toll offensively, if you use your Wings offensively, if you use Consecrate, if you use Holy Shocks offensively. Your Holy Paladin, a lot of the times, the best form of defense is going to be offense. If the mob is dead before you can deal any damage, that might be the best way to go, especially in low-end keys. So Holy Paladin might not be the best high-end, prideful key pusher. It still is an extremely fun class, and it is something that's going to give you a lot of DPS if you choose so. And this has kind of completed the sections for the top 3, and then the healers are a little bit below them, and now we have to go to the spot, or the last spot, and that is going to be Holy Priest. And honestly, it hurts me so much to talk about Holy Priests in such a bad way, or talk to them that they're the worst healer or whatever, because they really aren't. A lot of times, if you want to get your plus 15 keys done, Holy Priest is going to be more than enough. Please guys, understand this. But at the same time, I don't want to sugarcoat the situation to Holy Priest in. I actually believe that Holy Priest feels a lot better in Shadowlands than it felt in BFA. Holy Priest has a lot of additional DPS buttons. You have your Shadow Wall Pain, you have your Shadow Wall Death if you really want to do a bit of more DPS. The fact that you can apply dots, or a dot that has no cooldown, feels really nice. A lot of your healing abilities are actually going to do something, especially with legendaries like Harmonious Apparatus. So all of a sudden, any healing ability that you do is going to contribute towards the reduction of your Holy Word spells. And that feels really good. Your toolkit feels a lot better. Guardian Spirit can be very cool in terms of managing a single target healing, especially if you run like the Guardian Angel talent as well. At the end of the day, in my testing, I felt that Holy Priest single target healing felt lackluster, especially when I compared it to other healers where they don't really need to use any cooldowns in order to provide a lot of single target. Holy Priest needs to make sure that they time their Guardian Spirit, really rely on Serenity, their big Holy Word single target ability. And if they have them, that's fine. If they don't, there is going to be issues. So what am I saying? Holy Priest feels better in Shadowlands than BFA, but it's last again. That's just because a lot of the changes that made Priest better, things that like bursting, removal through Master Spell, things like Grievous changes, also made Discipline Priest better. So you can look at the Priest class in general and say, oh hey, Holy Priest feels a lot better, but the changes to Priest class might impact this even more. And every time you're going to be playing a Priest, you're going to be compared to, hey, why aren't you playing this? And I really hate that. I really don't want Holy Priests to be viewed as the worst healers, but I also feel they need a stronger niche. And their niche of being jack of all trades is not good enough at this point. Especially with the fact that in BFA they were known as the healers that will provide a ton of HPS, and in Shamans their healing is not top tier. Maybe Blizzard is going to buff Holy Priests in order to give them a better niche. But keep that in mind, guys, that as long as Discipline Priest is not going to be over nerfed, Discipline is probably going to be the go-to choice for high-end Mythic Plus pushing. But that does not mean Holy Priest cannot do keys. A lot of people are going to watch this video and they'll be like, I'm not going to play my Holy Priest because I can't do +5s, +15s or whatever. You'll be fine, guys. Unless you want to get on those rated.io leaderboards, Holy Priest is going to be more than good enough for what you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, when you combine it with some of their more fun Covenant abilities that has been changed, like Unholy Nova from Necrolords, you can still do a decent amount of damage and it can provide a decent amount of healing. At the end of the day, you can never go wrong by picking a healer that's gonna give you the most fun. And if you're not pushing for an extremely high keys, don't worry about this. I'm extremely hyped about Mythic Plus. I'm extremely hyped about the fact that Season 1 Mythic Plus is going to be more about healing in terms of about providing or dealing with Prideful. It's going to be a healer affix, and that is really cool. But as long as there's going to be multiple healers that can deal with Prideful, you also have to look at their utility and their damage. And again, this is what I came up with. Let me know how you feel about this video. Let me know what healer you feel is the most fun. Let me know what healer you think is going to perform really well in Season 1. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next video.